Some stories have clear beginnings. But the truth is that the story started at the beginning of time. A series of events molded the framework for every moment since. This story is the beginning of a beginning, in which the future cause and effect brought to fruition. Episode 3, Part 1, I-9. Hand me that flint and striker, Petey boy. It's time we light this thing up. Now this particular method of stacking firewood is called the log cabin, after its square form. Okay, grab the newspaper and those twigs you gathered up. That'll make for good kindling. Can I try the striker this time, David? What's this new thing with calling me by my name? It's Dad to you, my boy. I'm getting older now, and all of the grown-ups call you David, so I should too. Son. David is my name, but I'm more than just David to you. Only you get the privilege of calling me Dad. Dad means that we have a special bond, one that's our very own. And you are son, and there's no other. The world is filled with people, and animals, Pete cut in. Yes, and animals. Most humans and animals you will never even meet. There are some that will come and go as you move through life. There will never be another you and me. That's why I'm Dad to you. Pete thought about this for a moment and then looked up at his dad. I understand what you mean now. Here you go, son. Take the flint and striker. Hold it low against the moss at the center. Just there. Push hard into the flint and shh, shh. Yes, just like that. Glowing smoke filled the center of the log cabin wood stack, followed by flames soon after. It didn't take long for the fire to reach maturity, catching hold of the side walls of the stack. That's my boy. It's good to know how to survive off of minimal resources. One day, we may not have a lighter or a match, or a flint for that matter. We come out here to remind ourselves of where we came from, and how to be a human that's in touch with the elements. But Dad, in the city, we have a never-ending supply of anything and everything we'll ever need. That's why we stay there, and not out here in the woods. Yes. But someday, it may not always be like how it is now. Our future is not guaranteed. The only way to ensure that we are well equipped is to test ourselves now and then. I'll tell you what's testing me right now. Pete slapped his arm. These pesky mosquitoes. Huh, yes. Those unfortunately come with the territory of roughing it. I know you're probably tired of hearing old Dad here rambling on about this and that and the meaning of life stuff, but there's one more thing we can learn from these mosquitoes. Okay then, let's hear it. While we are out here roughing it, so to speak, we are only guests to the animals that inhabit this serene woodland. They are equipped to survive out here in a way that we don't see in the city. The circle of life is ever present, and if you look close, you can see it. These mosquitoes survive off of blood. They have the tools for the job. They've been doing it for so long that they've even worked out a system of give and take. If you stop them from feeding on your skin, they leave toxins in you which end up itching. But if you let them finish, they will suck back out the toxin, or at least most of it. So what are you saying, Dad? I guess what I'm saying, Petey boy, whether we are aware of it or not, we are part of a bigger picture. If we consider all living things with respect, then we are living in harmony. If we try and force our will against nature, then we feel it sting. Okay, I think I understand, but I'm pretty sure that I heard Mother Nature's voice in the wind just now, telling us that it's time to break out those s'mores. Yeah, I think I heard that too, son. Have at it. After filling their bellies with sugar, father and son lay out next to their fire, They watched the flames send small embers up towards the sky, as if they were trying to join their distant glowing relatives who speckled the depths of space above. Morning came too early, as Pete and Dave were awakened by violent rustling in the bushes just off to the edge of their camping area. Shrill screams accompanied by fluttering from along the ground sent them digging for a flashlight. Pete got to it first and flicked the light on, pointing it in the direction of the frantic sound. Caught in the beam was a giant owl with coal-black eyes staring directly back at them. It was an unsettling sight considering their close proximity. The owl was clenching a small animal in its talons. Its body was limp. Pete could see a trickle of blood running across one of the owl's talons. The boy ran his hand across the dirt floor next to him, seeking anything to use as a projectile. He retrieved a small rock and quickly put it to use, tossing it at the bird. The rock landed square between the owl's eyes, just above the beak, sending it staggering backwards several steps. The bird's talons loosened temporarily, dropping the fragile animal it had been grasping onto. Once it regained its composure, the owl made an attempt to reacquire its prey, but Pete was ready with another object from the ground to sling if need be. The giant bird hesitated, looking at what was to be a decent snack, then back at the boy. After a moment, it turned and flew off into the woods under the last bit of nocturnal cover before the light of day. The small animal lay motionless just outside the brush it was torn from. Pete came over to the animal's side and knelt next to the thing. It was a mouse. It had taken a beating, but the boy could see that there was still a bit of life left in it. Although the mouse had a gash across its face, its body was intact. The mouse's heartbeat could be seen pounding through his chest. "Dad! It's still breathing!" "Pete, I know it's hard to understand, but this is how things are out here." "Well, we can't just leave it here. Owls need food too, just like mosquitoes." "Okay, I get it, but not this one. Not now. Petey boy, I know this sounds brutal, but he won't survive out here for long now. The only thing you can do is to—" "No! No, we can't. I won't do it." "I understand." David joined Pete next to the injured animal, resting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Son, go get the shovel from the car. We can bury him after I'll make it better, Dad. Look at him. He's done nothing wrong. He just needs a bit of help right now." David looked Pete in the eyes, wanting to explain how the critter won't survive, but he saw how important it was to Pete to try and help. "There's a lesson here for both of us. That's what we came out here to do after all," David thought to himself. "Okay, what do you want to do then?" "I'll clean it up and make it a bed to rest on. When it wakes up, I'll feed and tend to it until it can fend for itself. That'll take time, and that's if it survives." Pete pulled a towel off the back of his chair by the fire and folded it up. He gently picked up the small animal and laid him down on the makeshift bed. "Okay, son. He's in your hands. Please don't get too attached, just in case—" "I know, Dad." "And what will you do with him when we get back home?" "It can stay in Rosemary's cage until it's well again." "Son, rats eat mice." "No, Rosemary won't. She's nice. I'll talk to her first and tell her that this one's off limits. She'll understand." "If you say so." Pete spent the morning cleaning and dressing the wound on the mouse's face. The mouse was still unconscious, but at least his heart had settled. Along with an open wound on the rodent's face, he'd suffered from several broken ribs when the owl's talons first nabbed him out of the bushes. "This will take time, my little friend. You're coming to live with me now. I'll make you better." The boy and his father picked up the camp that afternoon. The car was filled to the brim with gear. Pete kept the towel bed and the mouse on his lap. "Here you go, little guy. You are a guy, right?" "Whatever you are, we are on our way to the big city now. Portland is where we live." The ride home was just under 2 hours, but it felt like more to Pete, who was eager to get the mouse situated. "Hey you, mouse." "Ah, there you are." I was beginning to think you'd never come to." The mouse opened his eyes, but all he could see was blurred light. He went to rub his eyes, but when he did, he felt a deep, searing pain run across his face. Oh, hey, little man, I wouldn't do that. You've got quite a nasty gash there. But on the bright side, it should make for a wicked scar." Who there? Is Wood still? Oh dear, you're more feral than I expected. No, not Woods. You were saved by my person, Pete. I'm Rosemary. The mouse made a series of attempts to blink and squint away the blur. It helped some. He could now see an outline of a figure several times his size. What's your name, mouse? I9 is I. Your name is I? Yes, I9. That's an interesting name. Is it German? What German? Sorry, not I speak good much. Well, 9, you'll have plenty of time to pick up more language while you stay here and get well. So why are you called 9? The mouse paused, then said, For I number brother, sister, I number 9. Are you telling me that your name is after the number of brothers and sisters you have? Yes, no, we are 11? I only 9. Oh, I think I get what you're saying. Are they out in the woods still? The mouse didn't answer. I only ask because if they are, then I'm sure David and Pete will take you back as soon as you're able. No more. Owl. Rosemary stopped the interrogation. You must be hungry, and thirsty for that matter. This is my room. It's a cage in Pete's room, but it's got everything you'd want. Over there is the food dish dispenser, and just next to it is the water bottle. When you're ready to start moving again, you can even use my tread wheel. Pete was delighted to see the mouse awake and drinking from the water bottle when he arrived home from school. You're awake! Hi, I'm Pete. Sorry if it was such a shock to wake up and find yourself in a whole different world, but I couldn't just leave you out there after the owl hurt you. Pete? Yes, I'm Pete. Peter. Whichever you'd like. Hey, Pete, I don't think much of that got through to this little man. He's a bit feral, but I'll help him get up to speed. Oh, really? Thanks, Rosie. I didn't consider that. Pete sat on the side of his bed and spoke slow and softly. I help you get better, okay? Yes, I know now. You good eye. Thank you. Has he been up long, Rosie? No, not long. He says he's called 9. That's the number he was in his litter, I think. 9? That's you? Yes, I9. No name, just number. Would you like a name? That's Rosemary. It's special, see? Would you like that too? The mouse's vision was returning quickly, although he had a splitting headache and was sore all over. I see you now. You boy. I trust boy Pete. Who save I? What you like call I? Well, when I was a bit younger, I loved a movie about a detective mouse. I don't know why, but you remind me a bit of him. Basil. How do you like Basil? And it fits perfect with Rosemary. Basil, yes, is nice, said the mouse. Over the next year, Rosemary and Pete taught Basil about city life. He went on outings with Pete and David to see buildings that touched the sky. They ate at restaurants that served an array of extraordinary flavors. There was never-ending entertainment, including theaters that played movies that touched the heart and made him laugh. Consumerism seemed to be at the center of humans' desires. Products were displayed in windows, signs, and screens, marketed as items one shouldn't live without. The humans were good to Basil, more than he ever could have imagined, but after a time he began to feel something pulling at him. The city had opened his eyes to the grand immensity of the world. a world that Basil wanted to explore. Coming from life in the wilderness gave contrast to the big city, but neither of those options felt like his calling. Rosie, you know how grateful I am for everything you've done for me, you and the boy. I don't know how to pay you back. Kid, this was never about expecting anything in return. There's too much selfishness out there, and you'll find that out soon enough. But there's also humanity and compassion. I can see you were passionate about this, and it's what you feel you're destined for. You'll be great, of that I have no doubt. There will be times when you feel lost or hopeless, but you're resilient and will continue to be as long as you remember your passion. It's one of the deepest guiding emotions and can be the fuel that propels greatness. Don't lose sight of it. One more thing, Basil. I have some family down at the seafood restaurant at the end of Powell Street, the Crab Shack. Go there. Tell Max that Rosie sent you and that she's cashing in on a favor. Rosemary dug around the sawdust under a fake plastic cave in the cage of Pete's room. She retrieved an old golden coin, like ones Basil had seen in an old movie about pirates. Where'd you get that, Rosie? You wouldn't believe me if I told you, but I know now that it wasn't meant for me to keep. I'll tell you this much. When I got it, I was told of this very moment. Come back after you've seen the world and tell me of your adventures. Maybe then I will share with you my story. Take this coin down to the Crab Shack. There will be a man there at the end of the bar. He'll be wearing a silver ring shaped like a skull with a compass rose blooming from one of the eye sockets. Look for it on his left hand. With this coin, you'll be able to convince him to take you to the sea. I'm guessing that's where your story starts. How do you know all this, Rosie? Like I said, you wouldn't believe me, Basil. Just trust me. I'll be back someday, Rosie, and I'll come bearing gifts and stories. He nuzzled his head against Rosemary's shoulder. Then Basil wrapped the coin against his back with a bit of cloth and left the cage. He made his way down to the house's living room, where Pete was playing a fancy new game on the TV. David was in the kitchen cooking up some lunch while humming a tune along with the radio. Hey guys! Guys! It took a bit of work to get the father and son's attention. They both stopped what they were doing and came over to the entryway of the house where Basil was waiting. I know I've talked about this for a while now, about heading out into the world. It's that time. No, you can't go, Basil, I won't let you, Pete cried. It's not your decision to make, son. This was always the plan. Your dad's right. I'm not leaving you because I'm unhappy, but because I need to see what's out there. You've taught me enough to get by and how to survive. I'm ever so thankful for you both keeping on me about my speech, too. If there's a way, someday I'll come back and repay you both, I promise. That's a nice thought, Basil, but we love you and you don't owe us anything. Except maybe a postcard or two. Do you know where you're heading? Yeah, I have an idea. He's going to get hurt out there, Dad. Petey boy, you've already given him more life than nature had intended. He's not as helpless as you make him out to be. Have faith that'll do and see amazing things if he wants to. I'm sorry, Basil. I'll just miss you so much. Please be safe and come back if you need to. Our home is always open to you. Do you need anything from us before you leave? Money? Food? Thanks, but I'm a pretty good scavenger, and money would only weigh me down more. Well, take this just in case. David grabbed a pen from a drawer and wrote something on a small yellow post-it. If you want to reach out, that's my number and our address. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, David. I'll write to you after a while and tell you about my adventures. Pete opened the front door and Basil stepped over the threshold, stopping for a second to look back at the kind people that had taken him in. I won't forget you, he said, looking into the boy's eyes. Then Basil was gone. As the mouse walked along the rows of homes and cars parked on the street, he marveled at the ingenuity and craftsmanship of the modern world. Thinking about his life in the forest felt foreign and dreamlike. Since his language skills had improved, so did his ability to define the world around him. He He recalled that it wasn't words that crossed his mind back in the forest. Instead, it was emotions that painted his waking reality. Emotions which only acted as a canvas for thoughts defined by language now. A car, a street, a home, a light. It was easy to overlook the emotions behind the objective world around. Colors were now just that, colors. Color used to be felt as hope, inspiring, peaceful, or fear, but no longer. He found himself lost in these thoughts, and before too long he'd reached the intersection where his street and Powell met. Only a few blocks more. Part 2. Chum Bucket. The Crab Shack was a rundown joint with a neon light in the window, which only had a few illuminated letters. The crumbling brick exterior was painted blue, and there was red and white trim surrounding the door and windows. Basil could hear music drifting out of the door as it swung open. A patron stumbled out, covering his eyes to the light of the late afternoon. "Nice place," the mouse said under his breath. Basil was stopped at the door by a rather large and intimidating rat. "Kid, this ain't a place for the likes of ya. Now scram." "I'm meeting someone here, sir." "Nah, you're surely mistaken. Try the pizza joint across the way." "Yeah, that's not gonna work for me. I was told to speak to Max." "Oh, really? And just who are you, Pinky?" "Are you Max?" "I'm only here to speak to him. If you want to talk to him, you better give me a jolly good reason. Kids and mice aren't allowed in here, and it appears to me that you fit both of those categories." "Rosie sent me." "Who did you say?" "Rosemary. She's one of you." "Oh, really? Do you say?" "If you're wasting my time, I'll be most I'm not. Really. Stay here for a minute." The rat retreated into a broken-out brick and the foundation of the building. A few minutes passed before a nose poked out from the dark crack in the wall and ordered Basil to enter. He was taken through a passage in between the walls of the restaurant and the bar that led back to the dishwashing station. Behind the machine that washed the dishes was another hole. "Don't you say nothing unless you're spoken to, get it?" "Yeah, sure." "All right, just through here, Pinky." Basil entered the hole and into a room set up with small card tables and dim lighting. Rats sat all around. The tension in the room was palpable, but Basil suspected it was always like that, and not just on his account. Smoke was thick in the air. The smell of tobacco and excrement hit him like a wall. Rats at the tables looked over their cards in hand as they side-eyed him walking towards the back. From the dark recess of the room, several voices in unison commanded, "That's far enough. Why have you come to see us?" "I was told to speak to Max. Rosemary sent me." The voices continued to speak simultaneously. "And who are you to her?" "She took me in about a year ago when I was in need." "Are you Max then?" "Max? Yes, he's with us now and we speak for Max. Why have you come to see us?" "Just to ask for permission to enter the human bar. I'm supposed to meet a man there." Basil began to see the outline of something giant stirring just beyond the light. "Tell us why we should let you." "Rosemary said that Max, or you, owed her a favor." "The favor was paid when we let a mouse speak to the king," interjected the bouncer rat who guided Basil in. "It's true, little one," spoke the voices from the darkness. The dark began to teem with movement as the king emerged. A mass of intertwined rat tails and bodies moved into the light. Basil held his ground, but wanted desperately to be over with this unexpected interaction. Half a dozen of the tangled rodents were dragging a cluster of rat bodies behind them. The mouse could now see the morbid reality of what he faced. Basil choked back his alarm and disgust. There were more lifeless rat bodies affixed to the 6 that spoke than Basil cared to count. "Max is that one just there, at his tail end," said the king, gesturing over to a rat tangled in the back, who looked as though he'd meet his demise any moment. "Tell me, What's to stop me from snacking on you right now? Basil felt the same shaky fear that clutched him while in the owl's grasp. It was fight or flight. He tried his best to hide his nerves and hold ground. Eat me? Ha! That would be such a wasted opportunity. But you're king and I'm just a mouse. What do I know? What do you know, little mouse? What opportunity do you speak of? I guess I can let you in on a little secret. Basil leaned in a bit and lowered his voice. The reason I'm here is that man knows where my twin brother is. He's the worst kind of mouse. In fact, he gave me the scar on my face. I got word that he's been stealing and pickpocketing around this area of town and has built up a nest filled with valuables. I just want my revenge. Don't care for the loot he took, but if you want, I guess I could get it to you. That is, if you can resist the temptation of snacking on me now. So what'll it be, King? Will you share a small mouse with all of your hungry mouths, or will you wait for me to return to you with great wealth? How do we know you speak the truth? You could just be lying. Do you think I make a habit of coming into bars like this often? The king withdrew for a moment back into the shadows before returning with an answer. We have decided. If we don't see you back here with what you've promised, then I will send word out to our other families. You will regret ever crossing us. Who is it that you seek? I don't know his name. He has a silver ring, one with a skull on it. You speak of Captain Greystone. You'll find him all right. The dirty booze hound is at the end of the bar, drowning his sorrows like always. The bouncer rat escorted Basil through a ventilation port, which opened up at the base of one of the tables in the bar. I'm Roscoe, by the way. Might want to remember it. Roscoe pointed out the man at the end of the bar, then pushed the mouse off the lip of the vent and onto the sticky ground. The rat stayed at the edge of the vent and watched as Basil made his way across the floor and up the side of the bar. As the mouse made contact with the man, Roscoe slipped out of the vent and darted over behind the bar. He weaved between bottles and jars of green olives, and up to a shelf just under their location at the end. I'm all ears. It looked as though the man with the skull ring was already 3 sheets to the wind. He was hunched over his mug, staring into the glass as if he'd find the answers to his problems at the bottom. Thick, wild brown hair crept out from underneath his beanie. His stubbly face was weathered and sad. An old black peacoat hung around the bar stool that Greystone teetered on. Sir? Sir, excuse me. It took some trying, but Basil finally got the man's attention. You are Captain Greystone, are you not? I mean, I was told that was you. I came looking for a man wearing a ring just like you have there. Basil pointed to the man's hand. So what, mouse? Please, go away. Can't you see I'm busy? Just hear me out for a minute. I think you might be interested in what I have to say to you. Nah, I'm good. Go now. I'll buy your next round if you don't find what I have to say interesting. Really? With what? Hear me out first, then you can decide if you want the drink or the alternative option I've brought for you. Okay, mouse. What do you got? Said Greystone before knocking back the rest of his drink. I'm looking to get to a boat. I'm no chauffeur. You said you'd hear me out. I'm asking you to get me to the coast. I don't do the ocean anymore. Why aren't you getting this? There's nothing that could change my mind. Basil pulled the makeshift backpack made of cloth off of his back and removed the golden coin. Does this mean something to you, Captain? Greystone rolled his eyes and then looked down at the mouse, about to give him the boot, but froze instead. Don't flash that around here. Okay, now you have my attention. Come, let's go somewhere a little bit more private. He picked up the coin and pocketed it. The hand with the ring offered up a ride for Basil, and he accepted. The man walked over to a booth in the corner of the bar and placed Basil at the table. You know what that is, right? Greystone said quietly. Yes, I know exactly what it is and why it's important to you. Basil had no clue, but wanted to keep the pressure on the man. I've been searching for that loot for the better part of a decade, and you just come in here holding a doubloon bearing the Spanish cross? Give it back now. You can have it after you've fulfilled your side of the deal, assuming you're interested. Where did you find this? Are you going to take me or not? And give it back. Greystone was either thinking hard or had blacked out. Hey, Captain, what's it going to be? I'll take you. And the gold is mine, yeah? That's the deal. Okay then. Let's get out of this joint so I can sleep off a bit of this buzz I've been working on. My truck's out back. We'll wait it out there. Greystone opened his coat pocket where he put the coin and said, Hop in, Mouse. It's Basil. What? Basil, it's my name. I have a name, you know. I'm going to be something in this world, and you're going to help. Fine, Basil. That's great. Now get in already. The captain got up out of his seat with Basil in his chair, but tripped over a small critter scurrying underneath the table. A voice from the bar yelled, That's it, Captain, you're cut off. Greystone responded, I was just leaving anyhow. It was dusk outside when they exited the crab shack. I'm around back. Hold on to your coin for now. I'll be getting it soon enough. The captain crawled into the covered truck bed where he'd built a platform out of 2x4s for an old mattress. Before he passed out, he offered a hand to the mouse. Greystone lifted Basil up and dropped him through the open cabin window into the passenger seat with the Spanish doubloon. Basil suspected that it had been less than 10 seconds after he was placed there that the man began to snore like a greyhound. The mouse sat with the coin. He hadn't actually looked at it much until then. It was beautiful, even under the flickering light from the parking lot. There were images of lions in the open spaces between the cross at the center. All of the markings were raised from the surface of the coin except for a single lion's paw, which was indented. Basil thought about Rosemary and where she could have possibly acquired such a thing. The day had been so filled with new experiences and excitement that he'd barely had time to reflect on the family he'd left. He wondered what Pete and David were up to and missed the comforts of the cage with Rosemary. Deciding to keep his attention on the road that lay ahead, he took consolation in knowing he could ask Greystone to let him make a call before they parted ways. His attention pulled back to the coin, even though he'd been looking at it while his thoughts drifted away to his family. That's odd. There was a seam running along the inside of the indented paw print. The intricately small detail would have been virtually hidden from the human eye unless examined under a microscope. Basil touched his paw to the indentation and felt the metal give under the weight of his leg. It had a slight spring to it. I wonder... Basil gave a bit more pressure, to which it responded with a click. The face of the coin raised up ever so slightly. It had split apart along the ridge. He pushed on the side and it opened up like a clamshell. It was a few hours before the captain woke from his nap. Basil spent the time examining the inside of the doubloon. On one half of the inside, there were strange markings that looked like oddly shaped concentric lines. At the center of the image was the same cross that was shown on the exterior of the coin. The other half of the coin's inside had a series of numbers. I think the terms of our agreement have just changed, Captain, Basil thought to himself. The mouse wasn't 100% sure of it, but he was willing to bet that he'd just stumbled upon something much more valuable than the surface value of the coin. On the number side of the coin, there were 2 rings that could be rotated freely, each of which had a window cutout. The outer ring's opening showed zodiac symbols, and the inner ring had a series of crescent shapes that ranged from a sliver to a full circle as the dial was rotated. Each different position that the 2 rings were placed in presented a different series of numbers. Basil didn't know how to interpret the number sequence, but he thought it must have something to do with a location. The astrological signs, the crescents, and numbers seemed to be correlated and allude to a place and time. Rosie must have known about the unusual qualities and secrets the coin possessed, but why then didn't she mention it before? Was it a test? Questions about its hidden origin began to infiltrate Basil's mind. There were just too many coincidences and forecasts of fate looming in the air. It all felt too planned. Maybe this is what people call a streak of good luck. I guess I should get comfortable. It might be a while before that man wakes up. Basil's mind raced with possibilities. Roscoe had just about given up on watching the truck parked out in the lot behind the bar until the tailgate of the truck dropped open and a disoriented Captain Greystone tumbled out. This is my chance. The rat darted across the pavement, hopped up on the bumper, and then into the truck bed, tucking himself away tightly in a pile of dirty laundry in the corner. It was dawn before Greystone crawled out of the truck bed and joined Basil in the cab. "You're still here, Mouse. Still have that coin, I take it?" The man started up the truck. He sat there for a minute, rubbing his eyes and slicking back his hair in the visor's mirror. "Coffee. Then we'll get moving." He slid on a pair of shades, and then backed the truck out of the parking lot behind the crab shack. It felt good to be on the road finally. Basil had been quiet and patient and was itching to strike up a conversation. He tried to resist the urge, in fear that he might let his little discovery about the coin slip. They stopped at a gas station where Greystone filled up the tank and got a large cup of black coffee for the road. "If you're hungry, there's some peanuts in the glove box." Daylight was upon them by the time they began their drive on the coastal highway. They didn't talk much until they were about half an hour from the coastal town where Greystone had agreed to take Basil. "So what is this coin to you anyway?" asked the mouse. "I mean, you got pretty excited when you saw it, like it meant more than just money to you." "You're perceptive, little one. I'll give you that." "So then, seeing as how you'll be off and on your way soon, I don't have time to get into it." "Well, can you tell me the short version?" "I'll tell you if you quit the questions after." "Deal." Greystone was silent for a minute before clearing his throat. "I had a ship once, and a crew under me. I became obsessed with an old legend, and that obsession led me on a wild goose chase out into the middle of nowhere. I lost my crew and my ship out there. I'd gone off on a dinghy looking for an island that wasn't there. The ship was supposed to stay put until I returned, but when I got back to its location, it was gone. I had a short-range radio with me and spent 3 days adrift making SOS calls until I was picked up by a passing merchant vessel. They'd heard my broken transmission and redirected to come get me. My ship and crew haven't been located to this day, but seeing as how you've somewhat acquired a doubloon from the loot I was in search of. So this coin means hope to find your crew? I fear they're a lost cause, but the coin means the treasure's real and I didn't just take them on a wild goose chase. So that's that. Now it's my turn. Where did you get it?" Basil wasn't about to tell him where he'd gotten it, in fear of putting his humans and Rosemary in jeopardy. It's not important where it came from, but where it can take you. I said this coin is yours, but I think I may have an offer that's even better. I'm listening. I might have information on where to look for your treasure. How could you know something like that, Mouse? I guess the same way I could be in possession of a rare coin. If you can get us on a boat, I'll offer up the rest of what I know. The captain didn't respond. Gray skies and an occasional seagull was all that Basil could see from the vantage point down on the passenger seat. The truck came to a halt. "We're here." "So, Captain, what do you say? You want to take a chance with me, or should I give you the coin and be on my way?" Basil was hoping that the captain wouldn't take the coin, but knew that he didn't have a fighting chance either way. "You better not be playing games with me, Basil." "No, sir, Captain Greystone. I truly do have a lead that I'm sure isn't just, how did you put it, a wild goose chase." "Stay here, kid." The man got out of the truck. Basil hopped up on the dashboard and watched as Greystone walked down to another bar along the main strip of the commercial district of the town. A sign over its entrance read Hooker's Pub of Pebble Beach. There were oversized fishing lures decorating either end. "What are you doing, Captain?" Hooker's Pub had fishing poles, nets, lures, crabbing cages, and harpoon launchers lining its walls. It was a dark and seedy joint that local fishermen would frequent. Well, look what the catfish dragged in. I didn't expect to see you around these parts again, said the man tending the bar. Hey, Willie. Good to see you too. I found something interesting. Or rather, something interesting found me. Oh, no, not again. Haven't you done enough, son? In fact, you shouldn't even have come back. People haven't forgotten, and they certainly haven't forgiven. I know, Willie. But if there's a way I can clear my name, I'll do it. And I got nothing else after all. I just need a favor. You've run your favors into the ground, good captain. If I were you, I'd be quick with my dealing here before others get word. Listen to me, Willie. I've got something big on the line. All I need is a boat for a few days. I'll make it worth your while. Quit with the jokes. You know September is my busiest month. If you want to put cold hard cash up front, then we can talk. How about this then? Greystone pulled off the silver skull ring and placed it on the bar. You know what that is. Willie looked at the ring, then at the captain square in the eyes. If you don't come back in 72 hours, I'll put the word out and it'll be your head. We clear? If this doesn't pan out, then I'll offer up my head with no fight. Which one's it gonna be, Willie? The Angler Dangler, or maybe Hell's on Reels? Nope, you'll be taking the chum bucket. Come on, man. Take it or leave it, but I doubt you'll get any other deal. You're a slimy, watch it you. 72 hours, Willie said again as he tossed Greystone the keys. Basil watched as the captain threw open the bar doors and made his way back to the truck. I got us a ride. This better be the real deal. Basil felt a lump in his throat, but still managed to squeak out, It's as solid as you'll ever get. Greystone went to the back of the truck and grabbed a bag, then returned to the cab. We're on the clock. This is my bug-out bag, with provisions for a few days. That's all we should need. Hop in. We're going now? Yeah, considering that I just sold my soul to get this boat, it's now or never. Basil had hoped to make a call back to Pete before leaving shore. Do you have a phone? Yeah, why? I wanted to make a call before I left. No time, kid. I'll let you use it when we get back. Just a few days. Yeah. Okay, I'm sure it'll be fine. They made their way to the docks and found the old fishing rig amongst boats twice its size and 10 times more seaworthy. The chum bucket's hull was covered in barnacles. The sides had faded paint and streaks of rust from the bolts in the seams. The windows of the bridge were coated in a haze of sea salt and seagull droppings. That's us. They boarded and readied for push-off. Okay, Mouse, what's our heading? At least this old can has GPS. Okay. I don't know how GPS works, but I have some numbers we can try. That doesn't sound very promising, kid. I told you, you'd better not be playing me. Well, no point in keeping this from you now, Captain. He pulled the coin from the cloth he'd been keeping it in and placed his foot on the lion's paw latch release. The doubloon clicked open. Basil showed Greystone his discovery and how the side with the numbers could be changed depending on the alignment of the two rings. This is remarkable. I can barely see the details of it, though. I'll admit, my eyes aren't what they used to be. Basil described the symbols on the first ring. Sounds like Zodiac symbols. Okay, what's the other one? I'd guess it's phases of the moon? It's just a series of crescent shapes that grow until they become a full circle. That's a good guess. Okay, so let's set it to September. Greystone got out his phone. Yep, okay. September is Virgo. It's the one that looks like an M with a fish on the end. Next, he searched current phases of the moon. The moon's waxing. It's about halfway. Basil dialed in Virgo on the first ring, and the middle crescent shape on the second. The coin clicked as a set of numbers surrounding the dials aligned. If it is indeed GPS coordinates, then the first set of numbers will be latitude, and the second set is longitude. Read them off to me, and I'll plug them into the boat's system. Basil read the numerical sequence off. It's the right amount of numbers, that's promising, but the place it's showing has no landmass. Also, why would the coordinates change? Only one way to find out, I guess, Basil said optimistically. Greystone steered the chum bucket out of the harbor and pointed the stern in the direction of the coin's coordinates. Part 3: The Dark Depths of Destiny. Captain Greystone, sir? No need for formality out here, kid. You can call me by my first name. It's Shane. Shane Greystone. Okay then. Shane? How long till we get to the coordinates? If we keep like this, and the boat doesn't give us trouble, I'd expect that we'd be there just past midnight. The chum bucket is older than dirt, but it's reliable, I'll give it that. The sea was calm all throughout the day, and a steady breeze had been at their back. Basil and Shane exchanged casual stories and expressed their excitement for what possibilities lay ahead. So what's with the scar? I like to think of it as a mark from the moment my life changed. I'm sure you got a story behind it, so let's hear it then. Basil laid out the basics of what had happened, but decided to be more vague when it came to his humans and Rosie. I learned a lot about mortality and following my dreams. Well, the last thing I had to show for, as far as dreams go, was that ring. It got us this boat for a few days. Well, the coin's yours, Shane. You've held up your end of the deal. Basil presented it to the captain. Look here on the side of the inner coin. What do you make of this pattern? Shane squinted at the image. Damn these eyes. I don't know. What do you see? Explain it. It's like a blob shape with smaller shapes in the center. They all circle around the X. A few of the outer lines cut in towards the center like a U shape. Are they concentric lines? Yeah. Topography. It sounds like a map. Each of the lines represents a change in sea level. It's likely a raised landmass. So then the X must point to where we need to go? Right again, little one. X always marks the spot. Hold on to the coin for now, Basil. I'll take it off your hands when we find what we're looking for. You just keep me informed on what it says on the map. Yes, sir. Basil sat at the dash of the helm and watched the sun slowly fall out of sight beyond where the sky met the sea. He'd never imagined how peaceful a sight like that could be. It had barely been 2 days since his life in the cage with Rosemary. I wish they could see me now. Rosemary must have known about this coin. There had to be more to the story. Plus, she knew Shane would be at the crab shack on that exact day and time. It was all too easy. Do you know any rats? No. All I know of them is the few I've seen around back at the bar. I've never spoken to them, though. Why? Just wondering. Kind of an odd thing to wonder. I'll take a guess that there's more to that question. Yeah, there is, but you're no rat. I can respect that. You'll tell me if it becomes important to what we're doing here, though. Basil gave an understanding nod. There wasn't a cloud in the sky that night. The stars were just as bright as the moon. It was the first time that Basil had seen a night like this since back in the forest, a lifetime ago. The two sat down for a moment to share a quick meal from Shane's bug-out bag. Granola bars and baked beans. It wasn't exactly Christmas dinner, but it did the trick. After eating, Shane turned his attention back to the helm. Holy hell! What? There's fog. And lots of it. What? How? I don't know. It was clear as I've ever seen it just before we sat down. The vapor in the air was so thick that they could barely make out the stern in the front of them. It had engulfed the entire boat. Shane checked the nav. It had quit updating and was frozen in its last known location. Damn. The fog must be interfering with our equipment. With zero visibility, we'll need to be careful of our speed. Shane began to dig around in his bag. It's here somewhere. Got it. Shane pulled an orange flare gun from the bag, then loaded a flare into the brake barrel and opened the bridge door, stepping out onto the bow. Basil heard a cocking sound, then watched Greystone fire one off. The sound was underwhelming, but the vibrant red and orange light show that followed made up for it. The ball of light took a long arch in the sky above and illuminated the mist around it. They watched the light as it descended, looking for any shapes in the cover of obscure clouded darkness. The flare hit the water and was visible for a few seconds until it sunk downward. Nothing. We'd better get a sense of where we are soon, or we could be out here for some time. If it comes to it, I guess we can always bust out the fishing rods, Shane said, trying to make light of a bad situation. I've got a few more rounds for this flare gun. If I'm correct, we must be just about on top of those coordinates by now. I just don't understand how this fog could have surrounded us so fast. Shane loaded another round into the gun. It's got to be close if there's anything out here at all. The smell of sulfur still lingered in the air from the last round. Do you feel it? What do you feel, Captain Shane? Something. He strained his eyes to try and make anything out in the darkness, then fired another flare. It made its way down like its predecessor, but on its way down, began to illuminate a large mass out in front of them. There! Something's there! Basil's heart raced with excitement as Shane danced around the bow. I found it! I found it! Ha ha! They thought I was crazy, but there it is! The island in the mist. Shane slowed the boat to a crawl as they approached the landmass. The shore wasn't visible until they were a few hundred meters out from it. The mist at the edge of the water surrounding the island was thicker than before, and even though all they wanted to do was drop anchor and hop off, Shane stayed vigilant and cautious. They began to circle the island's shoreline. What are we doing, Shane? We're looking for an inlet, like the one on your coin. That U-shaped line on the map should be here if it's the same island. It should be the best place for us to drop anchor. There, you see? Just like on the coin. I don't know how you did it, kid, but you got us here. You and that doubloon. The cove cut deep into the island. Despite Greystone's excitement, he took great care in finding a safe location to drop anchor. The hum of the Chumbucket's engine cut off, exposing a deep silence in the air. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water as it contacted the coarse black sand on the shore. Mist from the water didn't venture onto the island or the cove. Instead, it lingered behind them, making it impossible to identify anything else that may be out there. Greystone gathered up his bag along with his passenger and hopped off the side, landing in frigid waist-high water. He produced a flashlight from the bag and clicked it on. The shore was narrow, only a few meters deep in most places. There was an area at the furthest end point of the cove that opened up to twice its depth. Shane and Basil walked along the black sand until they reached that spacious area. Thick brush and trees blocked their view from further inland. But Shane noticed something out of place leaning against a tree stump. He took a quick survey around the rest of the cove with his light before heading off to investigate the object by the tree. No, that's not possible. Shane had a look on his face like he'd seen a ghost. What is it? The captain ignored the mouse, or was too engrossed in what he was looking at to have noticed Basil's question. Basil could make out a long pole and a bucket laying against the tree. You think someone's here? Not just someone. This is my fishing pole. I'd know it anywhere. Something like this wouldn't just wash up on shore and conveniently set itself against the tree. It's possible that my old crew could have made it here the first time, without me. Yeah, that would explain a lot. Shane, widened his attention to include the thick brush that lay beyond the tree line. You see the path that snakes back into the brush? I do, but it's pretty grown over, isn't it? Sure, but that doesn't mean they're not here. They never came back to the mainland, you know. If they're not here, then... I didn't mean to cast doubt, Shane. Let's try to navigate the trail. I've been looking at the map on the coin, and I have a pretty good sense of where we are in comparison to where the X is. The trail may even head right there if we're lucky. I'm glad I didn't kick you out back at the docks and just keep the coin after you showed me its little trick. Wait, you were considering that? Kid, you've got passion, so I've been told. But you're not too smart about reading people. Take my advice. Always have an ace in your back pocket, and don't show your hand. What's an ace? You know, like in cards. I never played. It means don't be so trusting and always have a backup plan. So are you saying I shouldn't trust you? You can trust that I look out for my self-interests. Right now, my interests include you, so I'd say you're safe. Well, isn't that reassuring? You should take my lead on this, kid. Helping and relying on others will just get you hurt. This scar on my face says differently, Captain. It's a reminder about how amazing humanity can be, and how good it feels to help each other when we are down. Look, the brush is thinning out. It's faint. The trail leads up the hill on the right. That's good. It lines up with what the map shows, Basil said, double-checking the coin. I'm guessing we'll need to head up a ways, and then need to cut hard left around the ridge until we reach the other side. We should be at the X mark then. Very good. Let's keep moving. Keep your eyes out for any other man-made objects. Greystone and Basil made their way up the hill. The inclined ground became more severe the further they walked. Their backs were now to the moon, which gave an even cast of light on the increasingly treacherous terrain. Shrubs and patches of grass became more sparse the further up they went until only cold, hard rock lay under their feet. It's going to be hard to continue following that trail now. Does your sense of where we are on the map tell you anything about our next move? Can I get some light? Shane pointed the flashlight down at the top of the bag he had slung around him. Basil had been riding in the crease on the top. He dove into the bag and returned quickly with the doubloon. We've started up the hill and it wasn't too steep. That must be the longer distance between the outside blob shape and the first inner shape. Then, we had a pretty drastic increase upward. We gained elevation, but the distance we covered was less than the first. That's why the spacing is shorter as the inner space gets closer together. That's normally how topographical maps work. So are you saying we need to keep going before we make that turn? Yeah, I think we need to get over that rock wall up ahead, and that's where we go left. I'm following your lead, kid. I mean, you did read it correctly when it came to getting us here, so let's go with it. Greystone stood at the base of the rock wall, looking upward. It was about 3 times his height. There were enough footholds to make it up to the top, but not without some serious effort. Shane got to the top and removed the bag from around his shoulder. Thanks for the lift. Shane side-eyed the mouse and shoved the bag just enough for Basil to faceplant forward. Both man and mouse laughed in relief. There shouldn't be any more climbing. We just need to stay at this elevation and walk that way. It took a few minutes to recompose. Then they started off in the indicated direction. They were sandwiched between the drop-off to their left and another, larger cliff to their right. The pathway narrowed the further they went until there was only a couple feet of rock to stand on. It had turned into a narrow ledge that wrapped around the cliffside. Greystone put his back to the wall and began to sidestep. I don't know what's worse, doing something like this in the day where I can see how far I'd fall, or leave it to my imagination in the darkness. Just take your time. If it gets too narrow, then we can turn back and always wait out the night, but we've got to be just on top of it. Shane continued to sidestep. I don't even know what to look for. We could have passed the mark by now. Maybe there's something that we could have seen in the day, but the rock wall behind Shane ended, and he fell into a dark hollowed-out area, landing flat on his back. Basil was launched off the bag. "You okay, kid?" There was no answer. "Basil!" Shane pulled out his flashlight and sent the beam down the side of the cliff. "Basil!" A voice came from several feet behind him. "And you said you only look out for yourself. You were worried." "Knock it off!" Shane turned the light into the cavern. It was a large cave, deep enough that the flashlight couldn't illuminate the back walls. "Do you get the feeling that we found the X?" There was an old fire pit at the entrance of the cave, with a stack of wood at its side. Somebody's been here. As they moved deeper into the cave, the little bit of light that the moon provided at the entrance all but disappeared. The darkness was palpable. It actually seemed as though the black around them was trying its hardest to consume any and all light, including the beam from the flashlight. Sounds of ocean waves crashing against the rocks far below, and the whistling night air faded away until all they had was each other. "It all looks the same," Basil said, breaking up the uneasy lack of sound. "Yeah, it does. We'll have better luck with a bit of light from the morning sun. I could use a bit of shut-eye anyway." They returned to the fire pit and tossed on a couple of logs. Greystone pulled out a lighter and a small bottle of fire starter gel. "Work smarter, not harder, right?" They watched the flames cast a primordial light show, forcing inanimate shadows to breathe. The surrounding cave rock moved with entrancing life as the mouse and man fell into deep sleep. Sunlight poured into the cave, solidifying the framework of the space. Smoke was still rising from the fire pit. Basil woke up first. He'd dreamt that the cave was filled with ancient hieroglyphs that matched the images on his coin. He stepped out to the edge of the cave on the cliff. From this vantage point, he could see out beyond the mist, which refused to dissipate. Shane woke up shortly after and joined the mouse in the view. The light was somewhat jarring considering the previous night's exploration. Shane squinted and held a hand above his brow. "I think there's something down there. Do you see that pile of rocks? It's right at the base of the cliff wall, but over to the right a bit from those rocks. See it?" He went back and retrieved a pair of binoculars from his bag. "You really come prepared for anything, huh?" "It doesn't hurt to plan." The captain pointed the binoculars down towards the bottom of the cliff and traced to the right until the cluster of rocks was in sight. "It's debris from an old boat that high-centered. Looks like it's been here for a while." "It's hard to be sure of, but I'll bet you that's what's left of my old boat." A chill ran down Greystone's back as he stood at the cliff's edge. It wasn't a fear of heights or imagining what had happened to the old ship. No, it was an uneasy feeling, a feeling like something had just passed through him. He stepped away from the ocean view and returned his attention to the dark depths of destiny. This time, the light traveled further down the cavern. They walked until they reached the back again. "I don't get it. Is it just a cave? I didn't see anything on the walls or ground out of place, but it seems we must be in the right spot. Maybe my crewmen found the loot and somehow made it off this island without the old boat." Shane scanned the light across the back wall again. "Do you think there might have been a cave-in which cut off access to more of the cave?" "It's possible, but I'd think we'd see more loose rocks and debris around here if it was." The flashlight's beam hit on a small break in the cave wall. Light leaked through the thin divide, where two large rocks met. There was something reflective behind them, which cast back the illumination. "Think you can squeeze through there?" "I should be able to." Shane pressed the light up to the crack to help brighten the way for Basil. "There's something shiny way back there." The thought of the cave hieroglyphs entered Basil's mind again. This reminds me of Indiana Jones. I'm going to check the coin again for anything else I could have missed before I head back there. Just take the coin with you, if you think it can help. Basil fastened it to his back with the small piece of cloth, then looked back at Shane. If I don't come out, tell Pete, David, and Rosemary. It was quite the adventure. Stop it, kid. You'll be fine. The mouse crawled along the floor in between the two massive rocks. It was so tight that he had to suck in his belly for most of the way. When he popped out on the other side, he was shocked to see Captain Greystone standing in front of him. How did you get through? What are you talking about, kid? Basil turned back to the rock with the gap behind him, but it was no longer there. In its place was solid stone. We did it, kid! There was a large framed mirror standing over where Basil had come through, at the back of the cave, and a weathered leather and brass trunk just off to the side. Two men who had long expired lay on either side of the chest. What just happened? Where did all of this come from? Basil, what are you talking about? It's been here for years, I'm guessing, but I can't speak to those sad saps. No, you just sent me through a slit between those two rocks at the back of the cave. There was none of this. There was nowhere for me to turn around. And now the very place I crawled through, it's just gone. I think you need some air, kid. You're seeing things. Then what about these two guys? You don't think they might have been your old crewmen? Old crewmen? The ones you lost at sea that landed here. The fishing pole? Is this ringing any bells, Captain? I've never lost a man to the sea, and I've never captained a ship. Officially, that is. One of us is losing our minds, and I'm pretty sure it's not me, but let's forget about all that for now. Let's see what's in the trunk. Basil wanted to be excited in their discovery of pirate loot, but couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that something was very wrong. As Greystone opened the chest and marveled at the riches within, Basil was drawn to the back wall again. He looked it up and down, scouring every inch of it in search of the crack. There was no crack, just solid stone. Maybe I am hallucinating, due to the low air circulation in here. Shane, I'll meet you back at the entrance. I think you're right. I'm not feeling so well. Basil walked slowly back towards the cave's opening and into the light. The fire pit had stopped smoking. Basil started to undo the cloth holding the coin, but was startled to discover that it was gone. In its place was a leather satchel. He unclasped the two golden buttons holding the fold closed. No coin inside, just a folded up piece of paper. This is wrong. This is all wrong. Joyful whistling could be heard coming from the back of the cave. It grew louder and was accompanied by the sound of the chest dragging along the ground. That sucker's heavy. I'll need a minute before we hook it up to the rope. Shane made a gesture towards the edge of the cliff. Basil approached the drop-off and peered downward. There was a long rope leading all the way down to the narrow shore. A small tethered and intact dinghy boat replaced the wreckage on the rocks. Basil saw a large ship anchored out at the edge of the mist. So I was looking at those two skeleton men back in the cave. One of them was grasping a piece of gold, and I was about to take it off him, but I decided it was probably bad luck or something. Plus, it's not like there's any shortage of them now. A gold piece? Like a doubloon? Yep. That'd be the kind. Basil dashed back into the darkness. Hey, wait! What are you doing, kid? Shane followed after. It was much faster getting to the back of the cave for Shane this time without having to drag the chest along. When he got back to the spot with the mirror and the two skeletons, Greystone shined a light down at the floor looking for Basil. Where'd you go? I'm here. Shane pointed the light at the mouse next to the hand of the skeleton and watched as Basil wrenched at the bony fingers. Two of the fingers snapped off, sending Basil tumbling backwards with the doubloon in hand. He examined the gold piece and then breathed a sigh of relief. This one's mine. Keep it if you want it that bad. Basil popped it into his new bag, and then the two returned to the mouth of the cave. Shane began to pull up the rope. There's a lot of weight to this thing. The rope better hold. When Shane had reeled in the rope, he began to examine the trunk, looking for a way to secure it. Great care was taken in making sure that there was no way the rope could slip. Basil watched as Shane fixed a carabiner to the rope and then to the climbing harness he was wearing, which Basil hadn't noticed back in the darkness. One end of the rope was threaded through an anchored ring at the top of the cliff's face. What are you going to do? Well, I'll remind you, my little friend, seeing as your head's not where it should be. I'm going to use myself as a counterweight and pray to the heavens that the anchor doesn't give when I pull the chest over the ledge. Then, if all goes well, I'll lower it down to the shore. We'll follow. We'll get in the dinghy, and back to the Noki we'll head. Fingers crossed for smooth sailing. We'll wait till nightfall to enter the harbor, so no one sees us. I'll lower the cargo bay door, and back the truck up to it. Load up the loot, then live like a king. If we're lucky, then the ship's crew will be none the wiser that it was ever even gone. They'll think it was just left overnight for servicing. Any more questions? Yeah, I can think of a few. Later then, class dismissed for now. Shane lowered himself off the ledge of the cliff and then carefully reached up with an arm and pulled over the trunk. The line took the weight, but the anchored point shifted an inch. It's just adjusting to the load, that's all. Beads of sweat coated Greystone's forehead as he gave focus and intense effort in bringing the package to rest on the shore. A wave of relief washed over both of them. Our turn now, Greystone panted. Basil crawled into the bag, and Shane slung it over his shoulder. They descended down the cliff and onto the shore. It was slow going for Shane as he struggled to drag the chest along the rocky ground, but they made it to the dinghy, and back to the open waters they went with prize in hand. Either end of the small boat was hooked to cables hanging down alongside the cargo vessel. Then an electric crane hoisted them from the waters. When they reached the deck, Shane lifted Basil and the bag from the boat and gently placed him on board. Now for this heavy sucker. He pulled at the rope tied around the trunk and got it up on the ledge of the ship. It was much easier to drag along the deck of the Noki than it was on the shoreline. I'm taking it down to the cargo hold, where it'll be safe and easy for us to get to when we get back to harbor. The hatch that led down to the cargo hold was open, and Shane passed through, pulling the treasure behind. He carefully walked the chest onto the steel-grated stairwell. Basil heard the chest and its contents clanking down each of the steps. 5 stairs down, and the noise changed to a cascading metal waterfall, similar to the sound of when someone hits the jackpot on a slot machine. The sound was accompanied by a series of expletives, the likes of which topped anything the mouse had ever heard before. He could picture exactly what was going on, but Basil ran to the doorway anyway. Greystone was hunched over at one of the corners of the chest, grasping at doubloons, which trickled out at a split seam. Shane flipped the chest on its side when it was light enough to manhandle, then carried it down to the cargo bay. 2/3 of the loot had settled at the bottom of the ship. A flashlight clicked on below deck and shot light over to the stairwell. Shane hurried back over to the grated stairway and peered through the openings. Do you see where they went? Basil questioned as he made his way down from the deck. There's another room down there, but it looks like the floor is all grated there too. Just my luck. They both searched for a hatch to get into the space below the stairs. Here. Shane popped open a square hatch from inside the breaker room next to the stairwell. They went through the small crawl space used to access a few valves and pipes. Only a handful of doubloons were salvaged from there. The rest fell deeper into the hull of the ship. I'll have to come back for them. For now, let's count our blessings and get on back. Greystone made for the helm, pulled anchor and engaged the engine. The mist was still interfering with the ship's instrument cluster, and the nav system was frozen just like before. Shane picked a direction and stayed the course until the Noki broke through the wall of white nothingness. The GPS jumped back to life, Yahoo! Only thing left to do is get those coins before nightfall. The ETA shows around 2 a.m. Perfect time to dock and unload. Then, we're home free. Part 4. What We Treasure. I need to tell you something, Shane. Back at the cave. No need to apologize. And that darkness was disorienting. It's not just that. It'll sound crazy, but I'm just going to lay it all out and let you do with it as you will. I didn't sail over to the island on this ship. We came in on a small fishing boat named the Chum Bucket. Ha! That old rig hookers rents out, it wouldn't make it here in a million years. Well, it did. You told me you had to give up your skull ring to get the rig, so where is it now? Well, there you go, kid. I only took it off so I wouldn't lose a finger while climbing the rope. Greystone reached into his front pocket and pulled out the silver skull ring. We got to the island at night and docked in a cove on the other side. We camped in the cave and then searched it in the morning. There was a wrecked ship at the shore where your dinghy was tied off. I went through a crack in the wall, and then when I came out on the other side, I had this bag on me, which I've never even seen before. Sure, yeah, that's the bag you kept the map in. The map that told us how to find the island and where the cave cliff was. Why else would I have brought this climbing gear? I'm telling you, something happened when I went through the crack. I came out the other end to find that I was in the same place where I had just come from, and there was that mirror and chest and skeletons and bag. All that stuff wasn't there before. Okay, let's say something did happen to you in the cave. So what? I mean, here you are. We've got the loot. So what does that say about what I'm coming back to? And why would I not remember having this bag? You told me that you'd had that bag since you were in the forest. Well, it's good to know I still came from the forest in this reality. Pete and Dan, was it? You told me about how they saved you and brought you back to the city, took care of you, taught you to speak. Is any of that ring a bell? Yeah, but Pete's dad's name is David, not Dan. I'm sure I just misremembered what you said, kid. So it's all good then? Do you remember showing me the map at the crab shack? Can you tell me now where you got it from? Shane, if I could, I would, but that's just not how I remember it going. I got us to the island because of something that Rosemary gave me, but it wasn't a map. When we get back, I'll check in with her and see if I can figure out anything else. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to see the loot we got too. I didn't expect I'd ever be able to pay them back for their generosity so quickly. Hey now. Like I said before, I look out for myself. I didn't say anything about you getting any of the loot. Tell you what, if you find where the coins fell in the hull, I'll let you keep some. What exactly would a mouse need with money anyway? Thought your kind rather deal and trade. I plan on dealing with humans a fair amount. Money helps grease the wheels. Work smarter, not harder. Hey, that's what I say too. That's what you said when you made the fire with the lighter and the starter gel in the version of reality I came from. A couple more things, Shane. How did you get this trade ship, and what's so special about that ring? You showed me the map at the crab shack in Portland where I was finishing up some weekend plans and grabbing a meal before heading back to work at the Pebble Beach Harbor. I'm a freelance maintenance man for ships and a part-time treasure hunter, the same as many folk around these parts. I found this ring on a dive in a debris field that was known to be historically important. Legend says that the captain of the shipwreck was the previous owner of the ring. It's priceless, and I can't believe I just give it up to someone at Hooker's Bar. You were down on your luck and so boozed up that you had to sleep it off before we could leave Portland. It looked like you were living out of the back of your truck, and I'm pretty sure you didn't have a job after you lost your crew at sea. I never became a captain. I always wanted to, but then I just kind of got comfortable working on and cleaning up ships. I don't know what happened up there at the cave, but I'm starting to think you didn't just hallucinate. Basil sat quietly at the helm with Greystone as the two contemplated the revelation of parallel realities. The rest of the journey back was silent, with a few scattered questions from either party about how their counterpart remembered an event. Night fell several hours before they got to the harbor. They'd used the time to move the remaining treasure into Shane's bag and search for a way down to the lower hull's crawl space. The only access point that the ship had to that level was through a metal panel that had been welded shut rather than fixing the hinges. Greystone brought the nautical Noki into the port like a pro. He roped it off and then dropped the cargo bay door. Shane and Basil watched as the lowering door revealed a figure standing statuesque front and center. It was the Noki's captain, Harley. "You've been ratted out, Shane. Stealing a boat for a pleasure cruise to find lost pirate treasure? I could have you ruined. You wouldn't be able to work another day along the coast. Pops, I know I did you dirty, but I was onto something real this time." "And what do you have to show for it then?" "Well, see, there was a map, and it got me to a real place this time." "So then you found something?" "Scraps, really. There must have been a huge payload there, because whoever got to it first didn't bother to collect every last coin." "Show me what you got, Shane, and I may consider keeping this little endeavor of yours between us." Greystone retreated into the cargo hold, and Basil followed along the wall so not to be noticed. "What are we going to do, Shane?" "I'm working on it, but you just keep yourself hidden." "No need to drag you into this too," Greystone said under his breath. Shane pulled out a few coins he'd pocketed from the spill and placed them back inside the empty chest. He then picked it up and turned around, expecting to take it back to the ramp, but instead was surprised to see the captain walking back to him. "Here it is, Cap." Shane put the chest back on the floor and opened it up, showing Captain Harley the few remaining coins. "Well, that's a pity, ain't it, Shane?" "I'll be taking those coins, seeing as how they're on my ship and all. This just isn't enough for me to forget the whole thing, though. What else do you want, Cap?" "I'm sure that we could work something out. You're a good kid, Shane. It would be a shame to see you unemployable, and with a criminal record. Here's what I'll do. I'll forgive this whole thing, and you come work off your debt as a crewman until I see fit. But for now, I'll also be taking that ring of yours as insurance that you don't try anything squirrely." Shane furrowed his brow, but couldn't see any other way out of it other than taking the offer. He slid the silver skull ring off of his finger and handed it over to the captain. "That's insurance for a good job well done, Harley." "Good. Now get off my ship and get some rest. You've got a busy day of moving pallets. Be back here in 3.5 hours, or I'll send the police out for you. Get it?" "Yes, sir, and thank you." The captain flicked one of the coins up and plucked it out of the air, then winked and walked past Shane, up the stairwell where the loot had fallen. Shane picked up Basil and dashed to the ramp where his bag was laying. He tossed it over his shoulder and took off down to the docks. A wave of relief washed over them once they reached the parking lot where Greystone's truck was parked. "The captain said that you were ratted out. Do you think that he could have meant that the rats told him about what we were up to? There was one at the crab shack that seemed to have it out for me." "Roscoe. Well, if you're worried about it, you could always come with me while I work off my time on the Noki. You'd be a real help in locating the treasure, too." "I'd like that." Basil thought about contacting Pete, Dave, and Rosie, but decided to wait. Things just weren't the same. He'd somehow shifted into a world that on the surface appeared the same, but held small underlying differences. Though the changes were minor, the ramifications were monumental. Over the next few months, Shane worked off his debt to Captain Harley. Basil found a small access point to the lower hull where he could retrieve a single coin at a time. He stashed them in an empty barrel in the back of the cargo hold until Greystone had the opportunity to relocate them to a more secure location. It took a while for the Noki to return to Pebble Beach, but when it finally did, Shane took what loot Basil had pulled from the hull. He went out to deposit it in a safety security box. That was the last time Basil saw Shane Greystone. The mouse decided to stay in Pebble Beach for a time in case Shane came back. He rented a small place by the docks and lived comfortably off of a few of the coins from the ship, although he was very lonely. Early one morning, he was awakened by the sound of pounding at his door. Basil jumped up out of bed, hoping that it was Shane who'd returned. The mouse opened the door, but nobody was there. A small basket had been left on his porch. Something was moving underneath the cloth that covered up the top. Carefully, he pulled back the cover. His eyes widened as they met the face of a little Pinky. Basil looked around, but there was nobody in sight. "Oh, what am I gonna do with you, kiddo?" Basil brought the baby mouse inside and closed the door. He picked up the mouse and held him out to examine him. The memory of being helped by Pete and David came back to him, and what he'd said to Greystone about the scar on his face. It reminded him of how good we can be to each other and to help one another when we can't help ourselves. No note or picture or anything, so you got left, just like me, huh? I don't know where you came from, but I've got you. I'm Basil. I guess you can call me Uncle. Uncle Basil, for the time being. What shall I call you? The world of Mirror Mist and Moonlight is vast, with endless possibilities. If you enjoy the story and you want to see it grow, you can help the travelers and me by sharing, liking, and subscribing. Thank you.